In the past, I've said some pretty mean things about the middle two Pirates of the Caribbean movies. To catch you up, I've always thought it was really cheap that the second movie just abruptly stops and expects you to come back to see the second half of the story the following year. That was largely my big gripe with these two movies. But recently, my family got these movies on DVD, and I haven't seen them since shortly after they first came out on DVD all those years ago, so I thought I could rewatch them and see if my thoughts had changed. And shockingly, they have. Turns out, I'm not nearly as down on these movies for the big cliffhanger in the middle as I was back in 2006. For the same reason that, for my entire life, I've never held a grudge against the Back to the Future movies or the original Star Wars movies for doing the same. When you have immediate access to the movies, it's not that big of a deal when Doc is stranded in the 19th century or when Han's been kidnapped and we may never see him alive again, because 0.5 seconds after the jaw-dropper of a reveal, you can just pop in the next film and see what happens next. So yeah, I was bitter that the Pirates movies had shortchanged me, but I wasn't nearly as bitter when I was rewatching them this time. In fact, one claim I've made against this franchise several times is that films 2 and 3 are really just one gigantic movie split up into two installments with lots of fluff added in to kill time. And that's an accusation that I'm not sure I can stand by now. For one, these movies are super long. Dead Man's Chest is 2.5 hours long, and At World's End is 20 minutes longer than that. So no, I don't think that these movies could have feasibly been one big movie. If they had, you would have had to have cut a whole heck of a lot out of these movies, which arguably you could have done. Did we really need 10 minutes of Jack in the underworld sniffing a peanut, or yelling at multiple versions of himself, or licking a crab that looks like a rock, or trying to pull the pearl all by himself? No, not really, but even if you remove the scenes that were absolute garbage and added nothing to the film, and shortened the scenes that were still pretty pointless but were kinda necessary, I still don't think that you could have easily slammed these two movies into one big movie. And getting past the sheer length of these movies, I was actually surprised in some places that these movies still hold up as films. But really, when you get right down to it, a movie needs to have characters making choices and changing over the course of the film. That's what a character arc is all about, really. If handled right, then it can be very believable that Luke Skywalker goes from a wet behind the ears kid to a powerful Jedi Master over the course of 3 films. If handled poorly, you can find yourself screaming until your throat hurts because Padme knows that Anakin is a murderer from his antics in episode 2, and then she's shocked at his actions in episode 3. And these movies, yeah, they got characters making choices which change the course of the movie, which is as it should be. And we can visibly see these characters changing into different kinds of characters, which is as it should be. But is it handled very well? I would say that's a mixed bag. In some cases, I think it's handled very well. For instance, Barbossa was introduced to us as a thorough bad guy in the first movie. There's strong implications that he's going to let his entire crew have his way with Elizabeth after they've used her to lift the curse. But here, he's the closest thing that we have to a big good, which is to say, a unifying force that rallies the troops and gets them ready to charge into the face of evil. And I find myself believing it. Yeah, the voodoo lady saying that they need him to rescue Jack is a little suspect when we don't even get to see her apparently very easily rescue Barbossa from death, and yet it is a whole ordeal rescuing Jack. But still, when I'm at my closest to leaving the room while watching these movies because of the sheer stupidity going on, Barbossa is still my favorite part of the movie. In fact, that may even be true for the 4th film as well. But sometimes, nay, most of the time, I feel like these character arcs are really forced. One of the things about the first movie that I really loved was that it followed up the #1 tenet that my creative writing professor used to tell us: keep it simple, stupid. The first film is pretty easy to follow. You've got these zombies who need the blood of a Turner to lift the curse of this blasted gold, and they think that they've got a Turner, and then Will and Jack go to rescue her. Hilarity ensues. But I would have a brain aneurysm trying to succinctly explain these movies in just 1 or 2 sentences. I think the screenwriters felt that they needed to make the plot overly complicated with betrayals from everyone, just so that they could be certain to have 2 full movies of material. And that's kind of where I come back to my theory that these 2 movies could be combined into one movie. With the films that we got, no, we wouldn't be able to just cut useless scenes and then you have one movie. But if you went back to the script stage and said, oh wait, Elizabeth doesn't really offer anything to this story, maybe we don't need her, or Will Turner for that matter. If you did that kind of editing, then absolutely, you could cut these 4-ish hours considerably. But that stuff is all stuff that I mostly already knew about before watching the movies again recently. One thing I never noticed when watching these movies before was just the sheer amount of stupidity here. Dumb childish humor that I didn't feel like was all that present in the first movie. Sure, we might have a bird defecate on one of the Navy guys, but that kind of thing was the exception, not the rule. But in this movie, I don't know what happened, but suddenly I felt like I was drowning in that sort of thing. Jack has telescope envy, haha, we get it. Jack is having hallucinations of himself, which, the comic relief pirates are staring up at Elizabeth's baby maker. Really, movie? You went there? There just seems like a lot of this sort of thing that maybe would have made 12-year-old me laugh, but surely a movie can be emotionally and entertainingly engaging for all ages, right? The first movie did it just fine, so what exactly went wrong here? And then there's the business where the first movie makes a joke, and then these two movies feel the need to beat that joke into us like beating a dead horse. Why's the rum gone? Someone gets slapped when Jack Sparrow is mentioned. Will and Elizabeth correcting Cutler Beckett about Jack being a pirate. The thing is, the first movie actually had to invent these gags. It would have been neat if these two movies had at least made it look like that they were trying to make their own kinds of jokes. It's the perfect example of how all Hollywood is capable of doing is cannibalizing itself because they know that the audience is like that thing that came before, and that's less of a risk than doing something new that they just might not like. Overall, I found that my opinion on these movies has changed over the years. There's some things that I used to hate that I don't hate as much anymore. There's even occasionally a scene or a line that I really liked, and I found myself wishing that there was more where that came from. But I also found that there was a lot of stuff that I used to not hate before that jumped out at me this time. But it did make me want to go back and watch the fourth movie and see if it holds up as much as I thought it did when I watched it, or if I was just giving it too much credit because it wasn't 2 or 3. And it got me excited when I found out that there is apparently going to be a 5th Pirates movie. But then I deflated again when I realized that it could be as bad as these two. So yeah, roller coaster of emotions all over the place with this one. Anyhow, I hope you guys liked my little review on these movies, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I'll be back later this week with some other kind of video, most likely a review of some kind. So I'll see you guys later. Have a great day.